Hello, kids, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest turning business chaos into systems that scale. 15 years of helping small business find their operational flow state, no other than Mace Enzo Garza.
Hey Daniel, thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Welcome to Book 101, Ms. Enzo, and please, can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, so as you said before, I have run accounting pros for the past 15 years, and one of my greatest passions is helping my clients take all their chaotic systems and processes and make them sing by organizing everything for them in beautifully designed workflow maps.
Ms. Enzo Garza, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So let's talk about the color coded business. Why your workflow should look like a subway map. What inspired the idea of comparing business workflow to a subway map?
Yeah. So if you've ever taken a subway or a bus line and have looked at the map and tried to understand where you currently are and where you want to go, it would be very confusing if everything just looked like a jumbled up mess, like a plate full of spaghetti, if you are trying to get from A to B really easily. So, being able to have a workflow map that easily identifies all the steps in your process is really similar. You want to make sure that you don't make any wrong turns and you're always going in the right direction and not going off into, some other plane of existence. You want to get to the right place on time.
Interesting indeed. How does a color coded workflow system improve efficiency compared to a traditional method?
Yeah, so I think that it's important to understand who's doing what and the who could actually be something like software automation. So being able to identify very quickly what roles on your team or what members of your team are going to be handling a particular step in a very detailed process is important. And if you're just looking at something very black and white, it becomes very confusing. So being able to see it in bright color in front of you really helps to see who's involved in your process at what step and what bottlenecks might be happening at that step so you can identify them and remove them.
Can you explain the core principles behind designing workflows that resemble a subway map?
Yeah, the core principles really it starts with understanding what your process or your workflow is to begin with. So if you are trying to design a system or a map and you don't know what all of your steps are, it becomes very difficult in order to actually make that like to display that on the screen. So you need to have before you begin, you need to have mental clarity or a firm understanding of your process before you can have visual clarity, and you need to make sure that each step or each station in your map has a purpose. So, making sure that there's no redundancy, there's no confusion um, before you continue on. And then verifying that there's no dead ends, that there's always a next step until you reach the very end is also important. And then finally, making sure that you have your optimal route designed. So, do you have clear connections and logical flows and communication between people? So that would be like a transfer point between departments is really important. Otherwise, you kind of back in that jumbled up mess situation to begin with that you begin with.
What type of businesses benefit most from adopting a color coded workflow approach?
I would say every business can benefit from this, and it doesn't have to be very sophisticated, meaning like you don't need to even use like very sophisticated software. Even having color coded post it notes, if you don't have the budget to be able to afford a workflow management software, would be a great first step. But every business can benefit from that because you don't always want to be the person doing everything every single step in your business. As you begin to grow, being able to hand off those responsibilities, whether it's to a software like AI or a workflow management software, or a person is really important. And so being able to step back from that and allow the process to move without you can't happen if you don't have your processes documented in this way.
Miss Enzo, how do you decide which colors to assign to different tasks or process in a workflow?
So generally, I will assign different colors to different roles in the business. So it might be something like a manager of a department or a department head, maybe somebody who's underneath them, so an assistant or a junior on the team. So it's being able to identify who's doing what in the organization, not necessarily the process itself. However, I do also make sure that we are writing out the processes similarly, where we always are using the same action words so there's not confusion about what's actually happening next because we've agreed on what those actions mean.
What challenges do companies face when transitioning to a color coded workflow system?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest challenge would be time. So being able to set aside the time to actually design this yourself, and making sure that you follow through and train your team. So having a system where you take this information and relay it to the rest of your team and allow them to absorb it, and then following up to make sure that they are still following that process. So I think that if a business owner is very in the day to day, where they're not they're not working on the higher level tasks and they're really focusing on, just getting the work done, they might not have the time in order to manage these processes or to be able to eventually step back. And beyond that, it would just, yeah, I think it's just mostly the time and maybe desire. But once you start to get the hang of it and realize, oh, I can actually now take a day off, I could take a vacation, I can focus on bigger and better things. Then, and they start to see those wins, then they'll begin to adopt it more readily.
Adapt it fast. And how can a subway map inspire the workflow, enhance team collaboration and communication?
Yeah, so I think that it is important to have your team involved in the process mapping discussion. That way, everybody knows what their role is in these processes. Um, if you are not working together, then even designing this could be challenging. But once you actually have it in place, the communication is built into your workflow. So, there's going to be steps for notification or maybe question asking or information gathering, which will all be part of that diagram or the workflow. So it sort of naturally happens because you've designed it into your system.
Ms. Enzo, what role does employee feedback play in refining and optimizing these visual workflows?
Yeah. So I think that if I were to take my process and demand that my team follow it, from A to Z, I and never took their feedback, I might not understand what roadblocks they have or what bottlenecks they're facing, and having that open communication and discussing what's working and what's not working, sort of like a retrospective of, does this process work or not. I need to make sure that I'm having that. If I don't have that, then I might lose out on opportunities for saving time or building that team collaboration. So it is important to ask, does this process actually work? Are we missing any steps? Are we creating more confusion? Because if you don't ask that question, you'll never be able to clear it up. So you do need to involve your team, not just one time when you're designing the workflow, but sort of use this as a living document that you guys can update together on an ongoing basis, because the process is not going to be static because your business is not static.
Very well said, Ms. Enzo. Very well said.
Thank you.
Can you share an example of a company that successfully implemented a color coded workflow system?
Yeah. So, I mean, I won't name any names in particular, but we had one client that was working with another accountant previously, and their accountant was attempting to manage their invoicing process and was very unsuccessful in managing this. So, When we took them on, I asked them, how do you invoice? And their first response was, well, we just send the invoice out. But after spending more time with them and teasing the information out of their brain, we realized that there's many different steps. Like you have to gather a signed document, get approvals, gather time and everything else in relation to that invoice. And what was initially described to us as one step was actually about 50 steps. We were able to trim those steps down and bring automation into their process in order to, do certain things in the invoicing process. And we cut their invoicing time from, I think they had 4 or 5 days where they were spending invoicing previously, with many many meetings with their accounting team, down to about 2 hours once a month. And cut those meetings out completely because we were able to communicate asynchronously and look at the reports and the documents that we had created. So the owner now had, almost 4 days free where they were spending that time working almost alongside their accountant each month. So tons of time savings and also lots of freed up mental space.
How do you balance simplicity and complexity when designing a workflow that's easy to follow, like a subway map?
Yeah, so we try to take this more as steps or stops, I guess you would say, on the map. So we're not going to describe in detail in these workflow maps how exactly you get the work done. Meaning, you go here, you click on this button, and then you copy this text. Really, it's about understanding high level, where are you going? What are the different decision points? And who is involved in that decision making or actually doing the work, rather than getting into the nitty gritty on that workflow, which is really, that's really what you would be doing on a more detailed, step by step SOP. So we don't use this as that detailed SOP. It's really just about high level. How do we get it done?
How you level indeed. And Ms. Enzo, as a helper or helping small business to find their operational flow state, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Are you talking about my goals as a business or my goals working with small business owners?
Hmm, both.
Both.
Yes.
Oh man, can I rule the world with color coded SOPs? Perhaps.
Yes, yes,
Um,
definitely.
really, so it is my passion to work with small businesses because all of my family has really owned small businesses, in my life, and I've worked alongside of them and seen the struggles that they've faced. And a lot of it was really just all this, like not spending the time to understand and document what was going on and never being able to step away from their business. So I want to be able to give business owners more time in their day, more profit, to earn. They don't have to waste money on processes that don't work, and really just have mental freedom that, that if anything happens to you, maybe you're sick or you want to go on vacation, that you actually can step away and the business doesn't crumble when you're not around, that you actually have a viable business that in the future is also really sellable because you have everything, everything documented. A business that is solely reliant on the business owner, everything that's in their mind, is far less valuable than having a turnkey system that you can hand over to a new owner when you're ready to actually sell and move on to your next endeavor.
Good luck to your goals, Ms. Anzo, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be, of course, like you?
I would say to start small, that you don't need to have this color coded system right away for every single process in your business. Start with something that happens very frequently. So look at something that every day, every week, and then also is something that is stressful. That if it wasn't written down and something happened, that you would be upset about that. So uh, make sure that you're finding something that has a really high ROI, and then just sort of take it off in chunks. So start with that one big process and then go on to the next one and the next one until eventually your entire business is designed in this way, and it'll look like a totally different business at that point. But you don't have to do it all at once. Start small and then keep going.
Yes, baby steps, people. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yeah, so I have one book that I like a lot, which is called Traction. I'm sure that many people have heard about that. It is a great guide for you to understand how to work on the business versus in the business. And actually was recommended. This is a textbook called the Process Improvement Handbook, and it's very helpful to help you understand how do you actually do this, how do you create processes and understand the current state and where you actually want to go, and actually write it out on a piece of paper instead of just having it up in your mind. So very helpful.
Thank you for that recommendation, Ms. Enzo. And what are the some common mistakes business make when trying to implement a subway map style workflow?
I would say, again, trying to do too many things at once and getting frustrated and quitting. Other than that, I would say not revisiting those processes, writing them down once, and not describing them well to your team or working on them collaboratively with your team and expecting them to follow the process when they've not really been trained on them. Yeah, those are probably the biggest ones, and just not making the time for it, I think is it's important and has to happen, but we all get busy day to day, and it ends up sort of being shelved until the next day, and then finally you get to, the end of your week and nothing has been done. So not setting that time aside can be really harmful because, you can't grow without your systems documented.
How do you ensure that a color coded system remain initiative to diverse teams or departments?
Well, so first, I think it actually starts with hiring a diverse workforce if you're trying to bring diverse voices onto your team. But then it's really speaking with your team and getting their thoughts on, is this the best way to run this process? Because everybody's going to bring their own life experience and business experience into the mix. And you'd be surprised. There's lots of really wonderful ideas that can come from all levels of the team, and not discounting one person's recommendation or ideas is really important because that could be the thing that changes your business positively forever.
Miss Enzo, how can this approach be applied to remote or hybrid work environments effectively?
Yeah, so I think this is actually really helpful for remote or hybrid work situations. We have been remote, I think, since 2013, 2012, 2013, something like that. So we have had to have our processes documented fully and accessible by our team because we weren't going to sit in the room right next to them and share our wisdom. We had to have a central place for people to go to understand, where they fit in our processes. So it's great because there's never a question of who's doing what next and who's responsible for what. With the hybrid role, sometimes people can think, oh, there's the other people that are, working for you might be not doing things exactly as you would like. So this really ensures that you've designed it well, you've expressed it to your team by training them, and then they can go back and sort of follow the steps on their own without having to have you hold their hand in an office setting because it's just not possible when you're remote.
Not possible indeed. Can this approach be applied to any company that they want to change this color coded path?
Yeah, there's not really any limitation. So you can be in person, working in an office together. You can be hybrid or remote. You can be a small team or a big team. It really doesn't make a difference. Maybe you'll have more processes if you're a much larger company, but every business has processes, whether they have written them down or not. They could be something that is just known and maybe shared, from person to person. Uh, but yeah, there's really no difference between the need of having this if you're small or large. I think maybe you need it more if you're larger, but everybody has processes. It's important to write them down.
How do you measure the success or impact of a color coded workflow system in a business?
Yeah. So if you think about looking at your processes that are happening very often, maybe have a high risk for mistakes and take a lot of time and maybe take a lot of expensive labor, being able to track things like how much time did it take and how many mistakes did we make to run this process before and after we implemented this system would be a really great way to measure it. That being said, there does have to be things like time tracking in place and error tracking in place. But I'm sure that most people who are running services companies would have time tracking, for example. Or if you're maybe doing work as like a store, you might have be able to track things like cash over or under if that's a process that you're tracking. So, I mean, there's many ways to track it, but making sure that you are actually tracking it is really important.
Well, Miss Enzo, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101 and Low 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in its first season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. Miss Enzo, where do you see the future of color-coded workflows in business operations over the next decade?
Next decade is pretty far, but I would say that most people listening to your podcast probably have heard of things like ChatGPT or Claude or even agentic AI. And the first step in implementing AI or automation in your business is having a good understanding of your processes and its workflows. And I think that more people will begin to map everything out, whether it's color coded or not, in order to take the next step, which is to automate more of their work. So if you want to get ahead of the curve and be able to use systems like that, having everything written down, color coded, and ready is a really great next thing to do.
Well, Miss Enzo Garza, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or wherever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I would love for anybody listening today or watching today to find me on my website, accountingpros.com, pros with an E at the end, or find me on LinkedIn, Enzo Garza. And I'd love to work together to help you document everything and automate your work so you can get more of your mental freedom back.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Enzo Garza because if you support her, for sure, more small businesses will thrive. So, Miss Enzo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me today, Daniel. It's great to talk with you.
More to come, people. See you soon.